Hey everyone, you just got into Savage Worlds. Congratulations. It's time to have fast, furious fun. Fun? But you want to be the best player you can be. So let's talk about some tips for players to be the best players in Savage Worlds.
Savage Worlds, one of the best games today.
Hey everyone, it's Carl with Tabletop Tango. Look at the bubbles, do the stuff. We are your friendly local neighborhood Savage Worlds YouTube channel, and anything you do to help us grow would be fantastic, whether it's likes, comments, subscribes, whatever. So, what am I talking about today? So, today I want to talk about being the best player you can and understanding how to really maximize the fun for everyone else as well as yourself as you play the game. So, the first thing, let's talk about embracing the action economy. So, in Savage Worlds, you have the concepts of free actions, limited actions, and then just regular old-fashioned actions. And understanding all of those is important to kind of maximize your enjoyment. Free actions are things you can do that don't cost anything really. They don't take real time, like saying a quick statement or drawing a gun from a known position. And so knowing those things that you can do before you really have to spend your actions doing something is important to know, and understand with talking to your game master on how all that's put together. So let's talk about actions though. So actions are the things like attacking. They're like doing a taunt or a test or something like that against an opponent in combat or in some other part of the encounter, whatever. So actions, you can have up to 3 actions every round. And for the first action, there's no penalty. If you take 2 actions, there's a penalty of -2 for both of those actions. And then if you take 3 actions, it's a -4 for all 3 of those actions. Now that may seem kind of daunting, but there are times when it is absolutely critical or just a lot of fun to go ahead and take multi-actions. I do it all the time, even though there is a -2 penalty. If my skills are high enough, if I've got a D8 or a D10, I'm going to take that chance because it's going to be a lot of fun to be able to do something twice in your turn when the time comes to really make a difference into combat. You know, maybe I'm going to do a test before I attack. And tests, if you know the rules, tests are where you can make your opponent less likely to hurt you or vulnerable to your attacks more. And having 2 actions and doing that 1-2 punch can be really, really satisfying. Even just being able to take in that important moment where you really need to hit the opponent, taking 2 shots with your gun, hoping that both hit so you can do the damage you need to do. I use multi-actions all the time, and for better or worse, it's just part of who my characters are, and it's sort of how I roleplay the way my characters are put together. Also, as part of the action economy is the action cards. So unlike D&D and some other games where you set up initiative and then that's the initiative you have and you go through it over and over and over again, Savage Worlds, each round you get an action card that's dealt to you from a normal playing deck. So there are so many ways that you can impact that kind of action economy or the action deck, or when you go, you can get edges like quick and level-headed that give you extra cards, let you decide which cards you want to use, so that you might be able to go earlier in the round. You can spend a Benny, and Bennies are the meta currency, to get a new action card. So understanding that you may go early one round, but you may go late another round, or vice versa. You might be late in one round and get to go early in the next round. Really stretches your imagination and stretches your ability to kind of tactically think about what you're going to do and how you're going to do it. It may be important to cast a power that affects an enemy at a certain point in the round because it doesn't go away until after their turn. So you want to make sure that you get the maximum amount of play value out of that. So you have to think through those scenarios. So the action economy is a big one to understand. Know about the actions you can take and how you can take them and the penalties. Recognize that there's a lot of edges that can help get rid of those penalties, so why not go ahead and do that? Things like trademark weapon, which gives you a +1 on attacks. So there's a lot of things you can do. And then remember, the action deck is your friend. You can manipulate it, you can change it, you can get edges that help you and your team go sooner in the round. Maybe you get a joker and that gives you a +2. So there's a lot of cool stuff that goes on with respect to that. Second thing, master trappings. So if you're a power user, you're an arcane background, trappings are really a huge part of what makes your character your character. So, for example, you may have a blast power, but how does that manifest itself? Does it manifest it as a bunch of bees shooting out of your hand, encompassing the area? Is it kind of a fireball type thing, which is fire? Is it an ice ball? Is it sheets of ice that rain down? All those things are interesting trappings that make your character unique. It's not just the blast power. I'm going to use the blast power. I'm going to use something that makes myself unique. Now, normally that doesn't matter much as far as gameplay goes, but in certain situations, the trappings you have on your powers can make a difference. So if your trapping on your power is fire, and you go up against a mummy who's susceptible to fire because of his wrappings, you may have a benefit. You may have a opportunity to put them on fire. You may do extra damage. So that's always kind of interesting. But the one thing you got to realize is once you have those trappings defined, they're defined. They're not going to change. So think really hard about how your character interacts. Is going to interact with the world, what kind of power user you want to use, and sort of. And it's a great role-playing opportunity to understand what you are and how you interact with the world as far as your powers go. Another thing that's really important is understanding your edges. Edges are a fundamentally cool part of what makes Savage Worlds Savage Worlds. That's how you do character growth. You can increase your through advances, you can increase your skill points, sure, but most people think about the edges you can get that make your character interesting, give you abilities that you didn't have before, add bonuses, things like that. So really understand your edges and how they play together. That's really important because the edges are something that defines you. So many times in a game I play, we're doing something and the players go, "Oh, darn, I forgot I had this edge that I could have given you a Benny because I had common bond and I forgot about it." Nobody who's common bond ever forgets about it, but it's an example. So they forget how to use that, those exist and that they have them, and the synergies between them. They sometimes just forget. Like, for example, there's a lot of edges that give you extra rolls, repeat rolls, free re-rolls, and knowing that that can happen in the situations is super, super important. So know your edges, understand what they do, understand how they affect gameplay, and you're going to be so much more happy. Because when I just recently played a character where I was coming into the game late, and so I was coming in at veteran level, slogging through all those edges and understanding what they were and how they were going to interact and which ones I wanted to take was quite daunting, actually, because I didn't get to grow through the edges. But what was super important and what really taught me was, now that I'm at that spot, I really have to understand how all of these edges that I've taken interact with the world and interact with what I'm trying to do. And it just really magnified that because I was just coming in cold. And it's like I needed to know that this edge impacted this edge. I had to remember that I had quick so that I would get that extra card. I had to remember that the next one I was going to take is trademark weapon, but I couldn't get it yet because I still needed to do this and that with my character, who is a shooter. They're always shooters. And so it was really kind of a fun exercise to understand how important knowing your edges and knowing what they do can be. I put this one in the middle. It probably could be first. It probably could be the finale, but understand, really take advantage of bennies. Harness the power of the Benny. The Benny is so important in Savage Worlds. It does so much. And as a player, it is easy to get caught up in I use bennies for rerolls only. So I missed a trait roll, I'm going to throw a benny to get that trait roll back. Sometimes it's fun to fail, so you don't always have to spend a benny. Knowing when to spend a benny, knowing when not to spend a benny are kind of important things to think about. The game master may set up situations where failure is the most probable thing, and if you just spend all your bennies trying to succeed on something that doesn't have that much of an importance, and I find things like notice rolls, they don't generally have whatever's going to happen to you is going to end up happening to you anyway. So, but thinking about how to use bennies in an interesting way. People often hoard at least one Benny for soaking in a key moment. That is, it's kind of traditional wisdom, and I'm not going to go against it because I find a lot of times the players, some players who are new spend all their bennies early on. They get ahead of the Benny economy, because we talk about the Benny economy lots of times, where game masters are sending bennies out for different role playing, cool things the players are doing, and getting those bennies out. And so you're kind of collecting them, but you can spend them faster than you can collect them. And there have been situations where the player just gets hit with that one stray explosion of damage, and they really wish they had a Benny to do a soak. So that's up to you whether you want to play it on the edge or whether you want to hold one in the back of your back pocket. Other things is, remember, bennies can be used for other things. I mentioned you can use them for action cards. They can be used to do trait rolls. They can use for soak rolls, and they can also use for a narrative control. And that's, I don't know how all game masters do it, honestly, but that narrative control Benny is really kind of fun from a role-playing perspective. So the player gives you a Benny, and they get to control a piece of the story, very small, very minor piece of the story. I always use the example I have a convention game called the Helix Nebula Situation, and you're on a space station, and a player at some point wanted to have a fire extinguisher. Now, there's two ways of going at it. It's a convention game. I could have just said you had this fire extinguisher. Yeah, it's there. And if his Benny pool was low, I probably would have done that. But it was also a chance for him to say, I want this to happen. I don't want the game master to tell me it can happen, and it's small enough. So here's a Benny. I want a fire extinguisher. You've got a fire extinguisher. And you know what? He used it for incredible advantage for the players, and that was cool. So you can influence narrative, you can reroll, you can soak damage, and you can get a new action card. So there's a lot of things you can do with a Benny, and that's pretty awesome. To be the best player you can be, you need to take advantage of support and tests. They are some of the things that can really change the nature of the game. So support is when you roll to give a +1 or a +2 to another player by picking a skill that's applicable to the situation. So the player is trying to defuse a bomb, and you're going to support them by using your own repair, or you're going to use notice, or you're going to use science to, understand the mechanical nature of the system and help the person. And so you might give them a +1 on their roll. So support is a very powerful thing. And if you can think of ways to convince the game master that a skill you have that's high skill can benefit somebody in a certain way, it's fantastic and can really help out the situation. Because sometimes a +1 bump is the difference between a success and a raise, and a failure and a success. That's just the way Savage Worlds is, with 4 being the target number. A +1 is a big deal. So then testing, people take and use a lot less. At least my players do. They don't test as often as they could, because that's an opposed roll. That means you're rolling the dice first, and then your opponent can roll against you, and you need to have a success against their roll. It's not just against 4. So it's tougher to do, but it has bigger advantages. You can make your opponent distracted or vulnerable, and with a raise, you can add in some other thing. So it is incredible, powerful when you are going up against a tough enemy who's got, let's say, a high parry, and you're having a hard time getting against that parry, but he's dumb. It's time to try a taunt to see if you can, especially if your character is kind of specialized in some of these testing skills, which often players can do that as kind of the face character. He may have taunt as well as rabble rouser, the edge, to help sort of get an opponent back on their heels, get them flustered, and give that +2 to the rest of the party so that they can come in and get past those high parries or get past those other negatives that might be there against this opponent. So I talked about earlier, right? We've got the whole concept of -2 penalty for doing multi-actions. If you can have somebody in a party who's great at doing tests, test the opponent, get them vulnerable, suddenly that -2 doesn't matter so much, and you can really come in and do a 1-2 punch. So don't forget tests, learn how they work, think about how you would use your skills in a test. It's not just taunt, it's not just intimidate. Almost any skill can be used for testing if you can think of the right way of doing it, and think about your character and who your character is and how your character works, and find ways before the tests happen. Think of ways that you might be able to leverage those skills to do a test against an opponent, and kind of make a difference in that regard. Last thing, and this is true of all games, embrace the narrative, embrace being your character, think like your character, act like your character, have mannerisms, do all that kind of cool stuff. Take opportunities to role play. Savage Worlds gives you a lot of opportunities to do that with things like dramatic tasks where you need to narrate and you need to role play out how you're using a particular skill to roll and get some tokens. It also is in social conflicts, that subsystem, obviously for face characters or for others who maybe aren't face characters, who are a little still trying to convince and taking that risk. It's a chance to role play out how you're interacting with another person in game world who can help you or hinder you, and you can get to do 3 rounds and roll it out. And so it's not just, hey, I'm talking to the guard, I'm going to taunt him or I'm going to intimidate him. Done. It's 3 rounds of interaction and back and forth and seeing what happens. It's really, really cool. So Savage Worlds offers opportunities to do narration, opportunities to role play. I also remember you can get a Benny for role playing your hindrances. So always do that. But don't forget, I shouldn't say don't forget, but don't feel bad to remind the game masters, like, hey, remember, I've got this hindrance and I just did something that was ultimately negative impact to the party because I played my hindrance. How about a little Benny action? Because you know what? As a game master, I will give you a Benny all day, every day for that. So that's some things that you can do to be a great player in Savage Worlds from a rules perspective and from how you interact with your character. So once again, I'm Carl with Tabletop Tango. Look at the bubbles, do stuff. We'd love your likes, subscribes, all that kind of stuff because, I don't know, algorithm, whatever. So once again, we'll catch you next time on the channel.
Savage World. Benny.